On November 30th, 2018, the Smith family of Baltimore, Maryland, was enjoying a night out. Valeria Smith was with her father, Keith, and her stepmother, Jacquelyn, belatedly celebrating her 28th birthday. At the American Legion Hall, they ate, drank, danced, and took photos, savoring the joyous occasion. When the family left the Legion just before midnight, no one could have predicted that the night was about to take a deadly turn. A few blocks from Valeria's home, Keith slowed the car to a stop and rolled down the passenger window. Jacquelyn had noticed a woman on the street carrying a small bundle in her arms and holding a sign that read, "Please help me feed my baby." Moved by compassion, Jacquelyn wanted to offer the woman some money. As Keith would later tragically recount, stopping to help the woman in need would prove to be Jacquelyn's fatal mistake. Both Keith and Valeria have since shared a message for the city of Baltimore. Be careful who you trust, because things are not always as they seem. Today's case takes us through a roller coaster of fabrications and deception. It's a story of a city's reputation being exploited, while its officials conducted a clever and in-depth investigation that would eventually uncover the truth. On the night of December 1st, 2018, 52-year-old Keith Smith made a frantic 911 call at 12:30 a.m. from his car. His wife, Jacquelyn, had been brutally stabbed. She was bleeding in the passenger seat, desperately in need of immediate help. Their daughter, Valeria, sat in the back seat, a witness to the horrific attack on her stepmother. The operator quickly instructed Keith to head to Johns Hopkins Hospital. Despite the valiant efforts of medical staff, Jacquelyn Smith did not survive. She had suffered 5 stab wounds to her torso and a deep cut to her lower right arm. She was pronounced dead before 1 a.m., the victim of a random violent assault by 2 panhandlers who took what they could from her and fled.
Just felt moved to give her something. So at the stop sign, she waved her over to come on over to the car, and then out of nowhere, some guy came over while walking with her. And I hit my window, and Jacquelyn went to hand the money out, and the guy just leaned over and said, "Can I thank your wife?" And I said, "You can thank my wife." And within that split second, this guy commenced to stabbing my wife. Blood was everywhere. It was something that, it was horrific for something like that to happen. But I'm right now just absorbing all of it.
Jacquelyn Ann Smith, born Jacquelyn Trevane on July 4th, 1964, in Providence, Rhode Island, was remembered by her family as a joyful child who blossomed into a loving and selfless adult. From an early age, Jacquelyn developed a deep passion for music and poetry, traits that would stay with her throughout her life. At 54, Jacquelyn had raised 2 adult sons, one still in college, the other a graduate serving in the U.S. Coast Guard. Professionally, she was an accomplished electrical engineer, working for the Department of Defense in Maryland. In 2014, she married Keith Smith, and together they were active members of their church. Known for her faith and generosity, Jacquelyn's kindness touched everyone around her. The day after Jacquelyn's murder, her husband Keith and stepdaughter Valeria courageously addressed the media. They issued a stark warning to the community: do not trust those who appear desperate. They may be dangerous. The pair urged others not to be fooled by the seemingly innocent faces of those who ask for help, emphasizing that some may have sinister intentions.
I just want to let Baltimore know to be careful when you feel like you want to give, because you don't know what the intentions are of the person that you're giving to.
It makes me look at this whole world differently now. You know, it makes me look at everything and everyone. Nothing is ever what it seemed.
Law enforcement echoed the sentiment, cautioning Baltimore residents to stay vigilant and not fall prey to those who could be hiding their true motives. The brutal nature of Jacquelyn's murder quickly sparked fear across the nation. In Baltimore and beyond, many began to view the homeless population with suspicion as news of the horrific crime spread. The attack seemed to confirm growing concerns about the vulnerability of Good Samaritans. Then, a powerful moment occurred when Oprah shared her reaction to Jacquelyn's act of kindness. On X, she wrote, "I've done this 1,000 times, but will think twice before ever doing it again." As authorities released descriptions of the two suspects, believed to be panhandlers targeting generous individuals, tensions continued to rise. The suspects had robbed Jacquelyn and, if necessary, attacked her in cold blood. Homicide detectives met with Keith and Valeria on the night of the murder at Johns Hopkins Hospital. After taking their initial statements, the detectives immediately traveled to the 1000 block of Valley Street, where the attack had allegedly occurred. However, when they arrived, they were met with a troubling discovery. There were no signs of a violent incident at the scene. The following morning, Detectives Beauregard, Singer, and Santos returned to the area, hoping the daylight would reveal something new. They canvassed the neighborhood, spoke to locals, and searched the surrounding streets, but found nothing of significance. The murder scene remained elusive. The team could not verify where Keith's Audi had stopped that night to encounter the panhandlers. They also failed to locate any witnesses or physical evidence linking the crime to the location. The weapon, a knife, was still missing. What did stand out to the detectives, however, was the peculiar nature of the neighborhood. The 1000 block of Valley Street was quiet and sparsely populated. It wasn't a place where panhandlers would typically be found. Most of the homes were vacant, raising further questions about the authenticity of the crime scene. Keith and Jacquelyn's 2012 Audi A7 was brought to the police headquarters for processing directly from the hospital. Latent prints were recovered from the exterior of the vehicle, but they were identified as Keith Smith's. No additional prints were found. Inside the car, investigators found a pair of black gloves resting on the center console and another set of yellow rubber gloves on the back seat. A broken acrylic fingernail was discovered in the seat, seemingly matching those worn by Valeria Smith. Despite these findings, there was no unidentified DNA or fingerprints that could lead them to the panhandlers. Investigators were still struggling to corroborate the details provided by Keith and Valeria, particularly the exact route the vehicle had taken that night. The FBI was called in to assist, attempting to extract GPS data from the Audi's computer. Unfortunately, their efforts proved unsuccessful. The case was stalling, and the police had no solid leads. Meanwhile, the Homeless Outreach Team, or HOT team, was notified. Based on the descriptions provided by Keith and Valeria, they deployed all available resources, but they were unable to develop any viable suspects. The lack of a confirmed crime scene became a significant hindrance to the investigation. Determined to piece together the timeline of the evening, investigators began acquiring surveillance footage from across the city in an effort to trace the Smiths' movements. The team first reviewed footage from the American Legion Hall on Madison Avenue. Cameras confirmed that Keith and Jacquelyn left the hall together at 11:45 p.m. From there, the detectives examined 27 CCTV cameras along the route from the Legion to Valley Street, close to Valeria's home. But despite their efforts, they couldn't find footage of the Audi on any of the cameras. The detectives expanded their search, reviewing motion-activated residential security cameras that might have captured footage of the incident, beginning at East Chase Street. Still, the path to uncovering the truth remained unclear. Keith's cell phone showed no activity throughout the evening, nothing until he placed the urgent 911 call after Jacquelyn was stabbed. But the data from Valeria's phone told a different story. The records revealed a significant discrepancy. Contrary to the Smiths' original statements, which claimed they had traveled south after leaving the American Legion to drop Valeria off, the cell tower data indicated they had gone north. The signals traced their route to Druid Hill Park near the Maryland Zoo, where they stayed for approximately 15 minutes. This stop had not been mentioned by either Keith or Valeria to the police. In addition to reviewing the phones of Keith and Valeria, investigators turned their attention to Jacquelyn's stolen cell phone. However, there was a troubling revelation. The last recorded activity on Jacquelyn's phone was from around 4 p.m. that afternoon at her home in Aberdeen. Despite reports that she had her phone with her that night, there was no evidence to suggest the phone ever left her house. But the investigation didn't end there. Detectives began tracking down the missing items taken from Jacquelyn during the attack. Pawn shops across the city were checked, but Jacquelyn's purse, necklace, and phone were never found. A week and a half later, a break came when Jacquelyn's Visa card was flagged for activity. Detectives traced the card to 3 teenage boys who claimed they had found it in a Michael Kors clutch at a bus stop on the corner of Caroline Street and Madison Avenue. The teens were brought in for questioning as potential suspects. However, they were released when investigators confirmed that the bus stop was located on the route taken by Keith and Valeria, as tracked by cell phone data and Google accounts, not the route they had originally told police. 3 months into the investigation, Baltimore detectives had uncovered a troubling pattern of inconsistencies and contradictions in the Smiths' statements, but not a single piece of evidence linking the murder to the panhandlers Keith and Valeria had described. For example, Keith had initially told police that the male panhandler had reached into the car and stolen Jacquelyn's purse. But in later statements, he changed his account, saying it was the female panhandler who had done so. Keith had been vocal in the media following the murder, warning the community about the dangers of trusting the homeless. But when national coverage of the case intensified, he abruptly stopped speaking to reporters. The turning point came when police confronted Keith with the cell phone location data, revealing further inconsistencies in his story. In response, Keith changed his account once again. This time he admitted to being lost that night and expressed embarrassment about it. Yes, he confirmed, the family had stopped at Druid Hill Park to look through photos on their phones before continuing their journey. After Keith Smith was released from his interview, he drove straight home. Without delay, he remotely signed a year-long lease on a modest home in Florida, ordered a rental truck, packed his belongings, and left the state. Valeria, when questioned by authorities, quickly requested an attorney, bringing her interview to an abrupt end. She, too, soon left Maryland to join her father in Florida. Law enforcement was aware that Keith was fleeing. They began tracking his movements, and it didn't take long for him to realize he was being watched. In an attempt to avoid surveillance, he changed his phone number, switched providers, and even sent a new cell phone to his daughter. But despite his efforts, law enforcement remained one step ahead, continuing to listen in. In February 2019, Keith made 2 failed attempts to book international flights, one to Canada and another to Cuba. But he couldn't get past the fact that he didn't hold a U.S. passport. Eventually, Keith figured out that he could travel to the U.S. Virgin Islands with just a driver's license. During this time, his internet search history revealed another clue. Keith was looking up how to cross the Mexican border without going through official checkpoints. On March 1st, Keith rented a car in Texas, prompting an immediate response from Baltimore authorities. An arrest warrant was issued for both Keith and Valeria on March 3rd, stating that by 11:15 a.m. they were just 20 minutes away from the Mexican border, clearly trying to flee prosecution for first-degree murder. Later that same day, Keith and Valeria were apprehended by Texas law enforcement. The arrest warrant didn't specify how investigators believed Keith and Valeria were involved in Jacquelyn's murder. Instead, it detailed the many lies and deceptions they had fed to detectives throughout the investigation and the absence of any other viable suspects. But there was more to the story. Investigators learned from a friend of Keith's brother, Vic, that Keith had tried a different plan before resorting to the panhandler ruse. In the months leading up to Jacquelyn's death, she had discussed wanting a divorce with Keith. According to Vic, this was something Keith could not accept. It seems he had something far darker in mind. He wanted to cash in on her life insurance policy, on which he remained the beneficiary. Just 2 days after Jacquelyn's murder, Keith showed up at her workplace, requesting the paperwork to make the insurance claim. Law enforcement, already suspicious of his actions, alerted the insurer to hold off on the payment. This gave Jacquelyn's two sons the opportunity to contest the estate in probate court, buying them time to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Keith, desperate for cash, tried to apply for a cash advance on his American Express card, but it was declined. The revelation that the Panhandler murder was all a hoax didn't come as a shock to everyone. In particular, Jacquelyn's mother, who still lived in Rhode Island, publicly declared to the media that she had always doubted Keith's story. The Trevane family had never been close to Keith Smith, and it remains unclear whether they were aware of his criminal past. 20 years earlier, Keith had committed armed robbery 3 times at the same bank. In December 1999, Keith had lost his job at FedEx due to points accumulating on his driver's license. To make matters worse, he had just learned that he was HIV positive. Struggling to pay bills and needing medication for his condition, Keith saw the First Union Bank on York Road in Timonium as an ideal target. The bank's proximity to Interstate 83 allowed for a quick getaway. Keith entered the bank wearing a ski mask and carrying a pellet gun. He jumped over the counter, emptied the cash drawers, and fled through the back. That first robbery yielded about $15,000. 3 months later, he did it again, this time making off with $16,000. 5 months after that, he struck a third time. By this point, the police had a description of his vehicle, and after it was spotted in East Baltimore, a police chase ensued. The chase ended in a crash and Keith's arrest. He served 6 years of a 12-year sentence for the robberies. When authorities searched his home, they discovered roughly $20,000 in cash, wrapped in bundles and hidden away in a black bag. Valeria Smith, Keith's daughter, was charged as an accessory to the murder. While it was unclear what specific case the prosecution had developed against her for the premeditated murder of her stepmother, it was evident that she had helped cover up the crime. It was later revealed that Valeria had been struggling with her mental health. Diagnosed as bipolar, she had been institutionalized for treatment in 2012. Since then, she had also developed a heroin addiction. Many believed she had been manipulated by her father, coerced into assisting with the cover-up. For this reason, Valeria was offered a plea deal. She admitted her role as an accessory after the fact and agreed to testify against her father.
Helped her father. She's indicated in the plea agreement that, she helped her father dispose of the knife, helped her father dispose of, the other property, things of that nature. She's taken full responsibility for that. She's still extremely upset about the entire thing. And she, certainly apologizes to the rest of the family for her role in this.
But you can't tell us whether or not she's going to testify against her own father?
The trial took place in late 2021, where Valeria gave a harrowing account to the jury. She testified that after celebrating her birthday, her father drove the family to Druid Hill Park with Jacquelyn, who she believed had dozed off in the front seat. There, her father attacked Jacquelyn, stabbing her 5 times while she was believed to be asleep. After the murder, Keith disposed of the knife in the woods. Valeria was given 2 of Jacquelyn's wallets, including the Michael Kors clutch, and was instructed to get rid of them. She left one at a bus stop at Caroline and Madison Avenue, where she watched a group of teens pick through it. Keith's Panhandler story was fed to her, and she passed it on as instructed. The defense team grilled Valeria over the delay in her confession. They accused her of being more involved in the murder and of lying on the stand to protect herself. Valeria, now a recovering addict, testified that her father had forced her to lie for so long, but was finally telling the truth to avoid going to prison for a crime she did not commit. In December 2021, Keith Smith was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. A month later, Valeria received her sentence, 5 years for her role in covering up the murder. The verdict and sentencing brought a sense of justice to Jacquelyn's family, who had long fought for the truth to come to light. Does justice feel complete when the betrayal comes from within the family? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you value the way we uncover the truth behind the headlines, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more true crime deep dives. Thank you for watching.